Hi everyone. Today we are going to look at the IXL assignment DD.9 on scatter plots and lines of best fit. Okay, so before we begin working on this assignment, it's important to remember slope-intercept form. Okay, so slope-intercept form is always going to be y is equal to mx plus b, where m is your slope or the movement of the points, and b is going to be your y-intercept, or where you begin the line, okay, where it crosses the y axis. So a trend line is going to, the definition of a trend line is going to be a line that roughly describes the relationship between two variables in a set of data. You can use a trend line to make predictions from a scatter plot. Now, when we worked on the last IXL assignment, we would have the scatter plot, we would plot the points from the table, okay? From this point, we're going to look at what is the line that would best represent that set of data. Okay, it's not going to exactly represent it, but it's going to be the line that best describes the data that we have, if there is an association. So if there's a positive or a negative trend, if there's no trend, then there will be no line of best fit. So let's take a look at an example. So this says, what is the equation of the trend line in the scatter plot? And as we can see, we have these points plotted, okay? And this is exactly like that last assignment where you plotted the points from the table that you were given, and that's how you came up with the scatter plot. But in this case, now we have this black line here with these two yellow points on it, okay? This is what's called the line of best fit, or the trend line, okay? This is going to be the line that is going to best describe this set of data that we have. And you can figure out what this trend line is by writing it in slope intercept form, what we had done before, where you find the slope, you find the y-intercept, and then you just write it as y equals mx plus b. Okay, so let's take a look at the steps on how to solve this equation. And I'm going to go ahead and shade this in because we did have yellow points in the last graph. So we'll go ahead and shade these in yellow too. These are the 2 points that are going to be on our, and we're going to focus to find what the slope intercept form of our trend line is going to be. Okay, so looking at these 2 yellow points, they have them labeled down here as, this one down here is 2, 0. We're going over 2 places and then up 0. And then this one over here is going to be, we're going over 8 places on the x-axis, and then we're going up 6 on the y. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the slope of this line. Okay, so now there's 2 different ways we can look at finding the slope of this line. One of them is going to be to use the slope formula, which this is telling us that m is equal to the change in y over the change in x. And another way you can look at this is y sub 2 minus y sub 1, and then x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So if we look at these ordered pairs that they have labeled for us, we have 2, 0, and then 8, 6, and then just label them. So this is our first ordered pair, and this is our second. We can see that when we plug in the formula, we would say that we need y sub 2. So we're going to go to the ordered pair that we labeled 2, and we're going to pick out what's in the y spot of this ordered pair, which would be 6. So that's going to go right here. And then we're going to do the same thing for y sub 1. We're going to go over to the ordered pair that we labeled as 1, and we're going to go to the y, and that is 0. So in the top, our change in y is going to be 6 minus 0. We're going to do the same thing for the bottom. We're going to go to x sub 2, which we're going to go to the ordered pair we labeled as 2. We're going to go to the number that's in the x spot, which is 8. And then we're going to do the same thing for x sub 1. We're going to go to the ordered pair we labeled as 1, go to what's in the x spot, which is 2, and we're going to have 8 minus 2. That is going to give us the change in x, okay? And then we would solve. We would say 6 minus 0 is going to give us 6. And then we would say that 8 minus 2 is going to give us 6. And then when we reduce this, we would say that, okay, my slope of this line is going to be 1. Another way you can do it is we can say from these two yellow points, we can count the change in y, which is our rise. So we would say, okay, what is my rise of this over my run? And we could just count the places on the graph. So we would say, okay, so this is 1, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my rise is going to be 6. And then we would say my run is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6. And this is done by, we started at this yellow point at the bottom, and we just counted until we were level with the other point. So as we can see, we're at the same level as the other yellow point. When we reduce this, we would get 6 divided by 6 would just give us a slope of 1. So now we have our slope of this line, okay? But we have to figure out what the y-intercept is now, because when we write this out, so far we have y is equal to, you could say, if we wrote this as 1x plus b, we could also just write this as y equals x plus b. And that's telling us that we have a slope of 1. So now let's figure out what b is. And there's a little bit more steps to this that we'll take a look at. So if we use the slope, we can use the slope of this line to plug in to find out what the y-intercept is. So this says plug the slope m equals 1 and a point such as 2, 0 into the slope-intercept formula. Then solve for the y-intercept or for b. So here we have our slope-intercept formula. And we know that the slope is 1, and we're going to use this ordered pair here to tell us what b is. So if we have 2, 0, and this goes along the lines of what we were doing at the beginning of this semester, where we were plugging in an ordered pair to see if it was a solution to a system of linear equations. So we know that this we're going to plug into the x variable, and then this number we're going to plug into the y. So then when we go down to the second step, we plug in our 0 for y, so 0 equals our slope we have already decided is 1, and then we know that our x, we're going to plug in the number 2, and this is all plus b. So then we're just going to solve, okay? Come to this step and we have 0 is equal to 1 times 2 is 2 plus b. And then we have this one-step equation. We want to get b by itself, so we're going to subtract 2 from both sides. And that's going to get this side to cancel, leaving us with just b by itself. And then over here, we're going to get this of -2, which means that the y-intercept of this line is going to be -2. Okay, so now we're going to finish it all up. Step number 4, use the slope and y-intercept to find the equation of the line. We want to plug in these numbers that we found into the slope-intercept formula to get our final answer. Okay, so the slope-intercept formula is y equals mx plus b. We know that our slope is 1. Okay, so our slope right here is going to be 1. And then we know that our b is -2. So our final answer of the slope-intercept formula of this line would be y is equal to x minus 2, which means that even though we didn't see it on the graph, that at the y-axis, this line would cross at -2. Okay, now it's important to remember with this IXL assignment, they want the slope-intercept formula, so you do need to type in y equals, and then whatever you get for your slope, whatever you get for your y-intercept, plug it in just as it's seen on this screen. So if we were answering this question on IXL, we would plug in y equals x minus 2. Okay, let's take a look at one more example of this. So here we have this scatter plot. We've got our trend line labeled with the yellow points, okay? And we have to figure out what the equation for this line is going to be. And I encourage you guys at this point, try to pause this video and see if you can follow the steps that we just followed to get an answer. And then that way you can check your answer along with us. Okay, so looking at our first step, we want to find the coordinates of the two yellow points, which we have these listed down here as their coordinates are 3, 8, and then 6, 0. And if we were to go back and double check this, we would say, okay, we're going to go over 3 and then up 8, and there's the first yellow point. And then we're going to go over to 6 and up 0, and that's the second yellow point. Okay, so then let's go to our second step. Our second step is going to be to find what the slope of this line is, okay? And we could do it either using the slope formula, which is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Okay, or you can do it by just counting. But remember, you want to start with the point that is furthest, that is closest to the y-axis. So we would start from this point and then work our way to this point. Keep that in mind. It's going to tell us if it's going to be a positive or a negative slope with this line. Okay, so if we label this one as 1 and this one as ordered pair number 2, we would plug in y sub 2, which is 0. And then we would plug in y sub 1, which is 8. So right here we get 0 minus 8. And then if we continue, we're going to go to x sub 2, which is going to be 6. And then we would say x sub 1, which would be 3. So we would have 6 minus 3. Okay, when we solve this, 0 minus 8 is going to give us an answer of negative 8. And then 6 minus 3 is just going to give us 3. This is going to give us a repeating decimal, so it might just be good. In this case, we can just leave this as a fraction. It's actually easier to read in slope-intercept formula if we just leave it as a fraction. But we would say that this is a negative slope because 0 minus 8 is negative 8, negative 8 over 3. So that means that our slope of this line is going to be negative 8/3. Now, this can get a little bit tricky when you're solving for b, but it is still possible to solve for b, and you can keep b as a fraction in this case as well, okay? So now we're going to go to the next step and we're going to solve for b. So if we go here, we would say we want to plug this into the formula. So the slope-intercept formula is y is equal to mx plus b, and we know that our slope is negative 8 over 3. And we're going to use the ordered pair 3, 8 to plug into the formula. So our slope, and then we're going to use this ordered pair to solve. So when we have 3, 8 as our ordered pair, we know that the first number is going to be what we're going to plug into the x variable, and the second number is what we're going to plug into the y variable. So when we plug in all of our numbers, we would say y, we're going to plug in 8. And then our slope, we're going to plug in negative 8/3. And then our x, we're going to plug in 3. And all of this is plus b, which is still what we're trying to solve for this. So when we solve, we would get 8 is equal to, if you multiply this out, negative 8 over 3, we can just multiply this by 3, and then we're going to set this up as a fraction. It makes it a little bit easier to look at, and you just multiply straight across. So negative 8 times 3 is negative 24, and then we would say 3 times 1 will give us 3. And then you can reduce this, so we will reduce it. So negative 24 divided by a positive 3, it's going to get us an answer of negative 8. So up here we can see we have 8 equals negative 8 plus b. And then in order to get b by itself, we've got this one-step equation. So we have a negative number, so we're going to add this number to both sides and cancel this out. And then we would say 8 plus 8 will give us 16, which means that our y-intercept of this line is going to be 16. And then to finish this off, we would say we know our slope is -8/3, which we're just going to leave that as a fraction. And then we know that the y-intercept b is 16. So our final answer to this equation would be y is equal to -8/3. Okay. Now, when you're plugging in this into iExcel to get to put your final answer in, there is a button, and I'm going to show you what that looks like up here. Actually, I'm going to show you what it looks like here. And this is in it right from the iExcel assignment. So this button down here, this is where, of course, you would put in your answer to the question, but then you see this blue box that has this a fraction in it. If we click this fraction, it's going to set this up for us. So all you would do is type in the numerator. So in this case, we would type in -8/3, and then we would move it over and type in x. And then we would put in +16. Now, this is not the example for this problem that's on the screen. This is just an example of how to type it in from the example that we just did on this video. All right, thank you so much for watching.